Today, we will hear from impacted community leaders and clergy. Their stories speak to the lived experience and hardships that our community has experienced in this current climate. Where one is affected, we all are affected. So now I would like to introduce Pastor Darren Bowie with Progressive Baptist Church.
Good morning. Wonderful to be in your presence. I am the senior pastor of Progressive Baptist Church, and I was thinking how to deliver this faith reflection, and I was reminded of a passage in Scripture that resonates for our congregation and for those of us who are Christian. And it's a passage where Jesus looks out unto the multitudes of people and acknowledges that the harvest is plentiful, but the laborers are few. And in the entry of the passage, what he shares is that he looked out on these people. They were lost, they were in need, they had diseases, they were afflicted, they had sickness. And the statement that was made was that he saw them and had compassion for them. I believe that in this time of pandemic, especially during this virus, during this crisis, with a number of people who are in jails, detention centers, and different areas of confinement, we've been called to have compassion for them. Compassion would suggest that we should put ourselves in their shoes, to be empathetic to their plight and to be aware of the fact that they are in a situation right now that is beyond their ability to change. The good news is that we have the ability to make changes because the harvest indeed is plentiful, but these laborers that we have should not be few. So if you're a laborer, you should have compassion. You should be moved for the plight of those who are less fortunate than you. If you are a laborer, you should operate with the expectation that everyone deserves to have better than what they're experiencing right now. If you are a laborer, the understanding should be kindness and joy in your heart, and making sure that even though it's not you, you understand that it could have been you. So I believe that on today, as we think about the fact that the harvest is indeed plentiful, we need to activate our laborers. We need to share information about the hardships that people are facing. We need to talk about the reality of this situation. And at this current moment, there are families that have been dislocated from one another. There are people who are literally in spaces where they cannot get help. I believe help is available. And I think if we all work together, we can do a better job of helping. Each and every one of us has the ability to help. We have an opportunity to speak to senators or write letters or to call or to tweet or to use social media to the best of our ability. And I think if we engage ourselves, if we're active in our opportunity, in the opportunities that we have, we can make a real life change in the lives, not just those who are incarcerated, but those who are connected to them. Because at the end of the day, in a very real sense, when you dislocate families, you're disconnecting yourself from those who we all have been called to be unified with. We've not been called to be isolated as people. We see that we are social creatures by nature, and a part of our social experience is being able to open up and to be connected to and share with. And I think that we should do that very thing. We should open up. We should connect. We should share, because there are some people that need our assistance. So if you can, you should. If you can, you should. If you can, you should. All of us have the ability to, and I think that we ought to. We owe it to ourselves to be better than what some expect us to be. At the end of the day, this is what it's about. It's about connecting with people in a real live way and making sure that those who are in need of help. When you look at the Bible, Jesus came to serve the least, the lost, and the left out. The text that we read on a daily basis throughout our church is one that informs us that we serve a God of liberation and not of oppression. We serve a God that extricates, not makes sure that people are suppressed. And when you look back to the children of Israel during their Exodus experience, they were in an oppressive situation. People were getting sick. People were being mistreated. People had harm done to them. And as a consequence, the Bible lets us know that God saw them and God heard their cries and was moved in compassion and sent liberation so that they would not be in bad position. I believe that God serves all humanity, hoping that we are not confined, that we are not suppressed, that we are not oppressed, but we are liberated and that we are free. So I think on today, we should be unified with the expectation that liberation is the expectation, and our desire ought to be setting the captives free.
Thank you, Pastor Bowie. And I also want to say, please continue to show your faces. Thank you for that amazing word, Pastor. So as we're showing our faces, remember too that we are also live, so please share as well. And as we reflect on what you just shared with us, we're going to move forward and have Ms. Saunders speak with us and share a few words as well.
Thank you, Crystal. Good afternoon. I am Daylana. I am an educator from inner city Chicago and a longtime resident of Fort Wayne, Indiana. I am affiliated with several organizations around the city of Fort Wayne, NAACP, Big Brothers Big Sisters, Faith in Indiana, and others. This pandemic has been frightening for so many people. As a Black woman, this pandemic has disproportionately affected my community. Zooming in, this pandemic has disproportionately impacted my family. I have two very close uncles that are currently incarcerated. They are nonviolent offenders, one that has been charged and one that has not. This pandemic happened before we could see them released. When I hear that as a solution, prisoners should be practicing social distancing, I know that this is not a plausible reality for my uncles and for so many other prisoners. Prisoners are stacked in tight quarters. Cells and common areas are ill-kept and unsanitary. Sick inmates have gone untested and or untreated. There is a panic inside the walls of jails and prisons in Indiana. Families are fearful. My family is afraid. My grandmother is afraid for her son. My mom is afraid for her brother. I am afraid for my favorite singing uncle who sings no more. This is what brings me to this work. My faith in Indiana is yet strong. Faith in Indiana has chapters in Allen, Lake, Hamilton, Elkhart, Marion, and St. Joseph that reach tens of thousands of people across race, faith, and geography, that act in strong partnership with Indiana's 17 largest denominations, including the Catholic Archdiocese. We are a catalyst for faith communities, marginalized people, and partners to act collectively for racial and economic justice. We believe strong families belong together, care for each other, and count on opportunity to thrive, which is why we believe during this public health crisis, there needs to be equity and racial justice at the center. For the last few weeks, Faith in Indiana chapters have met with county councils, mayors, and county health officials to ensure those with the lowest threat are released. We celebrate our counties that have already started doing the necessary work to ensure that we get through COVID healthy and alive. As of a week ago, St. Joe County released 24% of its jail population. 60% of people on work release have gone home. 99% of cases where there would have been an arrest are now getting a court summons. Allen County has released 25 individuals. Allen County Jail has a capacity to hold 734 people, and throughout the year, they hold around 830. As of Monday, April 6th, there were 655 people in Allen County Jail. Marion County, as of a few weeks ago, has released 300 people. Instead of arresting people for small infractions, police are now giving citations. So estimations say Indiana's peak of outbreak and deaths is looming and will begin in mid to late April. When the virus gains a foothold, it will spread like wildfire. So it is imperative to have strong and immediate action and leadership from our governor to slow the spread of the virus and ultimately save lives. Desperate times call for desperate measures.
Ms. Saunders, we thank you so very much for sharing your powerful story with us. And I just want us to just think about that also on just loved ones that we have who are impacted. As we move forward with Mr. Fultz, he is unable to join us via video, but he is joining us audibly. So I ask that you join us now, Mr. Fultz, and thank you for sharing your story today.
How you doing? My name is Robert Folks. I'm a member of LaSalle Church of Christ and Pastor Hardy Blake in South Bend, Indiana, and a proud member of Faith in Indiana. I have spent over 22 years in our county jails and criminal system throughout my life, and I can truly attest to the fact that prisoners do not have the luxury of being able to socially distance themselves. I can remember a time when there was a time when I was in prison when they had the Hong Kong flu, and I can remember how it spread it throughout the prison, and where we barely had room enough to be able to bring the sick to the hospitals there inside the prison walls. I remember many men who have suffered scars from that, and still today there are those of us who went through that experience can relive this experience through with this virus that we're living now. But this virus today is very, very much more deadly. I have nephews who are incarcerated at this particular time, and I fear for their lives. I fear that that they could contact this disease by those who are being brought into the prisons, by officers who are leaving the prison, coming back to the prison on a daily basis. These men are in close confinement. They live in cells where there's either more than 2 to 4 men in a cell. I can remember that they don't also have the added luxury of being able to sanitize their areas where they live. I know that also that that men don't have the proper cleaning supplies to clean even themselves at times. I know during this time there's got to be a lockdown in the prison system where they are in close proximity. And I can fear for their lives where that is concerned. And so I call upon the government and our governor to release these men because they are at risk and their lives are at risk. They are facing a deadly virus that we have no control over at this particular point. During the Hong Kong flu epidemic, we did have those things. We had penicillins, we had antidotes for those, and we could fight those. But today we don't have that. So we're asking that the men who are in prisons today be released, those who are no threat to society, those who are there just due to the fact that they're in jail because they don't have funds in which to bond themselves out, or they're just living out little fines. We would ask, I know that the prison guards are very immoral and inhumane during these difficult times, because this is a time when they can get back at certain prisoners for doing certain things that they feel like they may have been violated. So I'm just saying that the governor of the state of Indiana, that I personally have a personal interest in these men's lives, because I've lived through it. I know what it's like to live in that kind of fear. I know that, that my family was living in that kind of fear while I was incarcerated, because I was the only son of 10 children. And my mother lived those things out, my aunties. So I lived at the fact that I lived with that threat. So I'm saying to all of us who can hear me today, that, this is a very, very serious consequence in which we're going through. People's lives are at risk, and they're becoming, a lot of them are becoming sick. Okay, they could even die, because we don't have the antidote to fight this courageous disease that's going through our country. I say this to the governor, that that he has the power to release as many people as possible, so that we may be able to reduce the curves and the prison population and the jail populations and the detention centers here in our state.
Mr. Fultz, I thank you for moving forward. So we thank you for that. Our next testimony that I would like to bring up will be Mrs. Boyd, and sharing some words also, because it's one thing on just hearing about what is happening. It's another to have a lived experience and hear it from somebody that is directly affected by this. So Ms. Boyd, we just ask that you share your story.
Hi, everybody. My name is Amanda Boyd. I come to you today in so many capacities. One as a mother, as a community leader, as a registered nurse. But today I'll be speaking from a position of which I feel most helpless during this time, and that is being a sister of an inmate that is currently incarcerated in one of Indiana's prisons. So as of today, April 14th, 2020, there have been 8,527 positive confirmed cases of COVID-19, 387 deaths in Indiana, Indiana currently has over 26,000 inmates housed in 21 facilities. 27 of those inmates in 7 prisons have been confirmed to have COVID, and several staff members. We all know and we've heard that the way to protect ourselves is proper PPE, proper cleaning practices, social distancing, and proper treatment. I speak to my brother twice a day as of now, and there are concerns in regards to the Indiana's corrections system being able to provide these measures. We have a responsibility to protect all inmates, all humans, but especially those communities that are vulnerable. All inmates, according to the release, will not be released, and my brother is not one of those. He is in his 30s and will be released. When he's released, he'll still be young and viable to the Indianapolis community. I believe health is a human right that we all are entitled to. Inmates have no control over their basic human needs at this time. That includes where they eat, where they sleep, where they bathe, if they receive proper healthcare treatment, etc. It is our responsibility as a society to ensure the safety of all, including those. As I reflect on my own situation every day dealing with COVID-19, my heart is filled with the heaviness and compassion for populations such as these and their families who have no control over the current situations. More unites us than separates us during this pandemic. I pray that the experience of my family and so many others moves the state of Indiana to make a more human decision to give voices to the voiceless. As of today, he is at risk of not returning home. We must do everything humanly possible to reduce the number of lives in jeopardy of being lost during this time, which includes releasing all inmates eligible for the early release according to the guidelines.
Mrs. Boyd, we just thank you for sharing your experiences. We're going to move forward to introduce Dr. Merritt. Dr. Merritt is the Director of Center for Research on Inclusion and Social Policy. She is a clinical assistant professor. Her research examines the complexity of poverty reduction, addressing issues of social service provision, racial, ethnic disparities, public health, public safety, and education, among others. Dr. Merritt's work evaluates the effectiveness of newly established programs, place-based collective impact efforts, and social service programs that aim to improve outcomes for families and children. Thank you, Dr. Merritt, for joining us today.
Okay,
Yes.
Great. Thanks for having me. So I'm not really here, similar to everyone else's stories and testimonies, about a personal experience as much as I am to speak about
Correct.
what this looks like from a research perspective and what we're kind of seeing across the country in terms of how people are being released and what that looks like for Indiana and some implications for what that means for our state. So Indiana, and I guess nationally, you guys have seen lots of stories that have come out around other cities and states that have been releasing offenders, particularly nonviolent ones, so that we can help reduce the spread of COVID in prisons. And it's been really interesting to watch kind of the trends that are happening and the fact that we have some differences in how folks are being treated in terms of not just their offense levels and why they're being incarcerated, but also the differences between how correctional officers are being treated in this process versus folks who are incarcerated. And so it really gives us an opportunity to talk things from a policy perspective, what things can be done to help mitigate the spread through more compassionate release, and really thinking about what that means long-term for our criminal justice system. We've seen a lot of other policy decisions that have come out over the past month or so, where I think a lot of folks are reduce the cost of the prison system by releasing people who are nonviolent offenders in particular. Then why can we have done that before? And then also, what can we do moving forward? So I think that's where a lot of the policy conversation is in terms of what we're doing with reducing the spread of COVID in the criminal justice system. We don't know a lot about what's going on in the state of Indiana. Our data aren't very great, so we aren't really able to say things about what that means for our prison population. What we do know is that in the Indiana Department of Corrections, we do have an overrepresentation of people of color, particularly Black males. And so as we think about what that means in terms of the spread of COVID, it means that there are also implications for Black men in particular being more vulnerable to the spread, not because they have any inherent diseases or illnesses, but because they are overrepresented in the prison system. And we also see that overrepresentation happening across Marion County, but certainly across the entire state in terms of having having about twice the number of folks who are dying from COVID-19 or being infected with it and testing positive relative to the Black folk state. So not just implications for people in the criminal justice system at large, but for a population that is already more and at risk for other issues as well. And so I did just want to point out that as you guys are thinking about what to do moving forward with next steps, know that Indiana has not been completely transparent about some things related to what data they have in terms of prison release, in terms of opportunities for doing so. And so it's an opportunity for us to learn more, especially from those of us who are doing more in community engagement, doing more research, to be able to have that information to make a case or just at least better understand what those jail data look like, what it means for the state, to be able to move forward in a direction that's informed and that really moves forward in a way that affects those who might be most at risk and most vulnerable for contracting COVID. And then lastly, of course, what that means for long-term policy decisions and practices as it relates to incarceration.
Thank you very much, Dr. Merritt. Thank you for sharing that with us. As we move forward, we would like to bring forth Reverend Timothy for our call to action.
Hello, I am the Reverend Timothy Murphy, Senior Pastor at Plymouth Congregational Church of Fort Wayne. At Plymouth, we believe that the one we follow brings good news to the poor, recovery of vision to those who won't see, and to let the oppressed go free. It is out of this commitment that I'd like to spend a few moments on the moral imperative before us. The state of Indiana, specifically our governor, needs to do more to release people from our jails, prisons, and detention centers during the COVID-19 pandemic. While the governor has encouraged the voluntary release of incarcerated persons, it's not enough. An executive order have been made weeks ago. Frankly, we are already late. We've seen COVID-19 hit places where people are concentrated in close quarters. By now, most of us are well aware of the risk that nursing homes face. Many have been hit hard. Likewise, incarceration centers are another hotspot. Whether in South Bend, Indianapolis, Gary, Fort Wayne, or elsewhere, our detention centers are incubators of COVID-19 just waiting to happen. Faith in Indiana is calling on the governor to use his executive power to blunt the damage COVID-19 will have on incarcerated community members. Now, some might push back and say, who cares? They're just a bunch of criminals. They deserve whatever happens. But we know that that's a lie, and that is a perversion of the society we are called to achieve, one that recognizes the dignity of all people. We know that the lives of incarcerated persons matter. Held in detention for immigration violations, they matter. Awaiting a court hearing but too poor to make bail, they matter. They are precious in God's sight. And whatever they've done, they certainly don't deserve a death sentence, especially one so capriciously meted out as through a pandemic. We must do better. Our state has the moral obligation to protect its residents. And by controlling incarcerated persons' movement, it has a special responsibility for their safety. But in the current conditions, it cannot guarantee that safety. It's simple. The state has the moral obligation to release people it cannot ensure their safety. To slow the spread, our governor should order the release of as many as possible. As we've heard, Indiana would not be the first state to take such action. We've seen this happen in places like Illinois, Colorado, Iowa, and elsewhere. There are certain groups for whom it is especially appropriate to be included in this order. Those who've served over half their sentences, those scheduled to be released within the next 60 days, those with serious medical conditions and the elderly, those who are pregnant, those incarcerated for technical violations of probation or parole, and finally, those who are awaiting court hearings. Doing this makes sense. Reducing the incarcerated population is a public safety imperative, a public health imperative, and a moral imperative. We urge Governor Holcomb to issue an executive order to protect Hoosiers and blunt the harm COVID-19 will inflict on our communities and on our families. Thank you.
Reverend Timothy, thank you very much for sharing. And let's keep tweeting. Let's keep sending those hashtags out. Hashtag free the people, hashtag COVID-19. Let's continue to see our faces too on the call. We thank you. And I'd like to present now our prayer and commission from Mr. McCruston.
Good evening, well, good afternoon, friends. My name is Minister McCruston from Witherspoon Presbyterian Church. I'm the youth minister here, and we are here in strong numbers. We believe not only in hope and restoration, but we also believe that in our faith tradition that we serve a God who is able and exceedingly abundantly powerful to do the things that we cannot. But it first takes our action. It takes our action because Ms. Saunders said, desperate times call for desperate measures. Mr. Foltz said that he is holding fear for his family members and others who are incarcerated. Amanda, she is concerned for her brother who is behind bars right now. Crystal Puckett said it best. We are not disturbed, we disturb them. But I want to personally thank Pastor Bowie for reminding us that if you can, you should. And I believe that we all here are able to. So let us go to our own personal faiths in this call to commission. I invite you to be freedom. Freedom for those who you call or see messy, a mistake, or unworthy. I hope that your compassion extends past your own loved ones and find others in their own time of need. I pray for those who are in jails, prisons, detention centers, juvenile centers, and work release, and all other facilities where they cannot social distance or make decisions for themselves. I commission you to be a beacon of hope for those whose lives are devastated by violence, suffering, and loss. I pray that we are healing for those who are suffering in these desperate times. I commission you to be the power behind a voice that the voiceless do not have. I commission you to be a bridge, bridging the gap between race, gender, age, and religion. I pray that God of all creation, Allah, Muhammad, I pray that all of our gods give us and give you the knowledge and understanding to become a person of reconciliation, binding the wounds of hatred and greed. I call for joy in the midst of suffering. I call for hope in the face of brutality. I call for faith in the valley of the shadow of death. I call for love for you, for you, for you, even for you. I commission my brothers and sisters on this call today that we all become the voice for the voiceless, the song for those who cannot sing anymore, the heartbeat for those who have lost lives. Though we are socially distanced, we are so close and so strong together. Many, we are one. And I believe that our collective faiths will do a great work in this city and in this state and in this nation. This is my commission to you, my brothers and sisters. Be strong. Amen.
Thank you so much, Josiah. We appreciate that very powerful prayer, and I want to appreciate everyone that was on the call today. As we stated, we're calling on the governor to use his executive power to the full extent that he can to make sure that he releases people that are the lowest threat to our society, to make sure that we can slow the spread of COVID-19. So please join us as we continue to fight this good fight. We're meeting with clergy and the local chapters to get a meeting with the governor. So more information coming soon. And just check your county Facebook page and our website for updates coming up. All right. Thank you, everyone.